At the start of the pandemic, we found ourselves working at art colleges that had little to no background in distance education design, and many art faculty were skeptical about e-learning. When the pandemic descended and thrust us all into the chaos of rapid prototyping e-learning, some of us had no experience in e-learning at all, while others had learning management systems that were underused, especially by art faculty. We found ourselves needing to not only teach art faculty effective online teaching strategies without a single published article or study about best practices for distance-based studio arts education, but also onboarding many faculty to their first ever learning management system. As the dust began to settle on months of quarantine, instructional designers from arts institutions gathered together to help solve the challenge of practical research in visual art e-learning. I'm both an instructional designer and a creative writing fine arts professor. As I began developing my workshop courses for the web, I conducted a literature review, which revealed that there were absolutely no relevant research in modality of e-learning related to fine arts education. Specifically, there was and continues to be no practical research about effective methods of teaching visual arts in online, hybrid, or web-facilitated environments. By recording art demonstrations and supplying these as homework in what is now a flipped classroom, faculty during the pandemic were freed to teach more customized lessons. Faculty used cell phones and tablets to record simple, short demonstrations of studio practices and shared these with their students online. Students were then able to watch the same demonstration multiple times to truly ground themselves in the lesson. And faculty who had previously spent hours repeating demonstrations of the same technique were now free to respond more to questions that arose with more personalized and customized video demonstrations about ancillary techniques. These videos have repeat value and can be used again in future classes to allow for more customized studio instruction during live lessons, both online and in socially distanced classes. Another positive outcome was a shift in critique practices. Students began creating a kind of meta art by creating first the art object for their class assessment, and then a secondary art object to present the former on the web, such as a video or cascade of photos of their installation. This meta art challenged students to think beyond the installation and consider artistic ways to document their installations as well. This led to profound critiques.
My position highlighted for me how a responsive, iterative approach to art education e-learning was essential for making it work for a broader audience that came to rely on it. A confluence of events in early COVID days resulted in me being the de facto instructional designer for continuing education, K through 8, teens, and our college. So our continuing education students are often retired, their kids have left the house, and they're really looking to develop themselves. This group loved long stretches of unstructured Zoom time. They were not self-conscious, and the social aspect of this was really central to what they wanted from the course. K through 8 students, in contrast or similarly, wanted synchronous time as well, but they wanted more structure. So that might be making funny faces, finding things from around their house. They also liked doing more Zoom time than perhaps the average e-learner, but there had to be a reason for it. Teens were quite different. They wanted structured and limited video conference. They reported that making art while on video conference was stressful. So the varied preferences regarding video conferencing reflect different goals and developmental needs of these different students. But with these audiences, the purpose was not always content delivery. Often it was socialization and engagement, and there needed to be different practices that address those needs. As well as just the different ages and what they could handle. So basically, by observing and adapting and iterating our best practices based on the needs of different projects should be pretty familiar to artists working in a studio practice, and should be where art education e-learning is really able to shine.
Like all of us, Pratt felt the need to be responsive and iterative in what we were able to offer our faculty as they had started to prepare for online learning. We had 3 main goals for our programming during the pandemic. We wanted to offer a place for our faculty to be heard or seen and to come together in this new to us virtual space. We wanted to offer sessions that introduced professors to learning platforms that could augment their existing practices. And we wanted to double down on the tenets of universal design for learning. In May of 2020, we offered Resilient Teaching Online, a series with trauma-informed practices at the core that also showed professors how to refine their platform choice provide multiple means of representation with the tenets of UDL in mind. The RTO made the case for community and belonging and showed professors how to create those spaces while also getting through their academic and curricular necessities. According to an institute-wide survey at the end of spring 21, students whose faculty completed the RTO were more satisfied with their online learning, rated their professors more positively as competent online teachers, and reported stronger connections with their peers. Our second offering, a year later, was the Playground Institute. It looked to further the outcomes of the RTO, but with special emphasis on what playful possibilities asynchronous offerings could open up in student learning, engagement, and success. Play was key in keeping things super low stakes for people who were still getting comfortable. We had to entertain, and we truly believe in this mix of synchronous, asynchronous, in-person, and online practices. And we wanted it to coexist, all to serve students better and have professors feel comfortable. And mostly now, we want to highlight what stays with us as we move forward.
The School of Visual Arts employs roughly 1,000 adjunct faculty members. So for the Office of Learning Technologies, March 2020 meant rapidly distilling the most essential lessons from instructional design into an hour-long Zoom-based boot camp. One of the recommendations we found ourselves repeating was to limit the amount of time students were required to spend in Zoom. At first, when we heard faculty members talking about keeping their students in Zoom for 3 or more hours, my colleagues and I cringed. However, once we caught our breath, we started hearing what they were trying to communicate. Faculty reminded us that studio art courses were about camaraderie, community, and collaboration. And that was the reason that students wanted to remain connected, even if only via a Zoom meeting. Traditional in-person students were accustomed to working in a shared space, observing one another and hearing frequent feedback from instructors over their shoulders. It was these moments of unregulated social interaction that informed so much of their learning process. So our office began looking at new technologies that might improve student engagement online and provide individuals with more personal agency than Zoom could offer. We landed on Gather. And after laying the groundwork for a shared online campus space, we have begun collaborating with faculty and students to develop new interactive learning galleries. The goal is to draw on elements of gamification to increase students' engagement and social presence online, and to provide an online arts education experience that feels more authentic and meaningful, even for the traditional studio-based student.
So what do we think's next?
What do we think?
I think that figuring out how to translate some of these observations into a research strategy so that we can actually back it up with data and come up with some strong recommendations for future practice.
Absolutely. I think, you know, especially in this setting, taking a mixed methods approach would be really valuable. And we have already collected, terrific observations and qualitative data, but now we need to think about how we can reinforce our, better understand our findings.
I think too, it like rips off what we were saying worked for our faculty, right? You provide the space, you listen to the need, you respond to the need, and then you just keep iterating. It's exactly what we've been doing cross-institutionally. And I think it just works.
And it's exactly what artists do, iterative design, like over and over practice, studio practice. I also think that there is a decided lack of research in applications for e-learning for visual art. And if nothing else, us getting together and talking about it contributes ideas for best practices.
Yes, for sure. I think there's actually the same to be said about art education research in general. So it will be fantastic for us. I mean, maybe we'll even find things that we learn through this experience that can support a blended approach for in-person students as well.